Hello and welcome back to another edition of SuperCoach Edge and another entry for Damo's Team Talk. This time coming out of, well, would you have it, round 24, the last round of the season. And geez, that's come around quick, and I've been saying that for the past few weeks, but it seems as though it's kind of crept up on us this time around, though. It's just, I can't really fathom the fact that that's the end of SuperCoach for another season. It's gone very, very quick, but I don't know if it's probably due to the fact that the past 2 to 3 weeks have been pretty hard to deal with, just with regards to obviously injuries and the like, and we've all kind of felt it in some way, shape or form for varying levels, and I've copped it pretty bad over the past couple of weeks, and I'll admit freely that I've kind of clocked off over the past couple of weeks, but such is the nature of what we do here. We want to continue on and put a bit of a bow on the end of the season. So as much as it is tempting to just throw in the towel and be like, yeah, well, why bother doing another record, another upload? We've got to see out the season, and owe it to all of you that have tuned in throughout the season and supported our venture as a whole, I guess, for SuperCoach Edge that I do with Liam, but also these team talk entries that I've been doing from week to week. And outside of that, time's kind of got away and everything else, but that's just kind of what happens this time of year with interest waning and everything else. But of course, I could go on about that for a bit longer, but I don't want to bore you to shreds. So we are here, of course, to recap round 24, and we will do a bit of a recap of our season individually, just to save some time on the, of course, last episode, the last official episode that Liam and I will be putting together over the coming days to put a bit of a bow on the end of 2024 on the season that was. So look out for that, of course, but just to save time with regards to that and not going really into detail in my team in that episode coming up, I will be doing it obviously here. So as I'm going live here, for those people that are tuning in via YouTube, if you are listening to this, I guess later in the piece via podcast, I was live. So for those people tuning in at the moment, feel free to flick through any comments, questions, everything else. Pick my brain. Feel free to do so. Key learnings, all that sort of stuff, I will be going through as well, just as a bit of a ticking off the agenda of what you have to expect over this video and I guess podcast. So let's have a quick look at the comments. And of course, our number one supporter, an absolute legend in himself, it is Adam. He says, look who's back in the kiddies den. I am back indeed, as you can see there. It's the referring to, of course, Paddy's scratching tower behind me there. And apologies as well for my voice, which is a little bit hoarse. And I will blame the umpires for that, especially number 32, who I will not name because my rage will be induced and I will turn very, very green and bust out of these clothes and turn into the Hulk, which I don't want to be doing. But always a pleasure to have you joining us, Adam, and of course another legend as well, funny man himself, Carl Meany. You've said, how do you do, fellow kids? Indeed, that's kind of what I'm channeling at the moment. As you can see with this baggy jumper here, the bag is just part and parcel. But of course, without further ado, ladies and gents, let us go and check out how we performed in this shitful round that was round 24. And as you can see here, ended up scoring a 2,373, so not too crash hot, but part of the reason was I had to gobble up another donut yet again. I was actually facing, I think it was maybe 2 donuts. I did have my last trade, which I used on Sinclair. I think it was Sheasel to Sinclair last week, so I ended up doing that and went into this week with 0 trades. So I was kind of at the mercy of the SuperCoach gods, as it were. As you can see there, ended up gobbling up that donut to score a below par 2,373 season rank. So one of the lower ranks that I've had in recent years, which isn't too good. But I've got to, as I said, just contextualize that with the fact that end of the season in just kind of unraveled for me with the donuts that I've copped, and that's part of the reason. It's nothing I can do within my control, which you can kind of go crazy about, thinking about, sliding doors moments and what ifs, all that sort of stuff. But when it comes to injuries and, having trades left, all that sort of stuff. I mean, I'll chat about it in a moment, comparing it to last year where I ended up having a 23rd man, much like I did this season, but at least, even though I copped injuries late in the piece last year, I think Doherty went down, Walsh went down. I brought in Hewitt with my last trade, and I've spoken about this in the past, but it allowed me to use Hewitt. Obviously benefited with those CBAs that were given to him via Walsh being out, but it did mean that I had to rely upon my bench cover as well. So I was playing a rookie virtually, I think it was the last 3 weeks of the season last year. You compare it to this year, and it's just, chalk and cheese, really. Even though I had a 23rd man, I had Rankine go down for 4 weeks. Gawn was out injured. Who was else? I'll have to go into my team, but there's too many to count where it's just moments where even if I had more trades up my sleeve, I wouldn't have been able to get myself out of the pickle that I found myself in. And again, it was nothing really outside of what I had done. It was just virtually just bad luck. And I think a lot of teams could fall into this bracket as well, where your season's unraveled in the last month of the season. And yeah, as frustrating as it is, you've just got to remember that, you can only control the controllables, basic sort of stuff really. But yeah, as I said, you can kind of be racking your brain and go a bit crazy about it and lose a bit of passion for SuperCoach off the back of it, because you're left thinking like, maybe I shouldn't have made that move and so on and so forth. But, there's butterfly effects in footy and SuperCoach and everything else, and players going down willy-nilly. So that's virtually it. Let's have a look at our team. So yeah, as you can see there, ended up dropping 7-11. Good call. In this case, it was a bad call. 7-11 spots to sit ranked 5,859th. So let's have a look at our team. Do a bit of a quick recap as we normally do, line by line. So Sinclair repaid me as sort of my last trade-in, a bit better than what he did the previous week. Scored a 111 against my mob after scoring an 86, which was up there in terms of his lower scores for the season. So at least I got a little bit of a return for investment there over the past couple of weeks. But 111, not too bad. Above his season average at the very least. Nick Martin, 97. Had a pretty good game. Disposal efficiency is just something that is just part and parcel with him, because he struggled with it, and it's kind of been stunting his what could be massive scores, which for him is something that he struggled with. I held him all year. He was the one guy that I was awfully tempted to get rid of off the back of his first 2 games of the season, where he's got a 63 and a 93, but backed him in and was I guess given the reward for the for virtually just sticking by him. So it was funny looking at his ownership here, and I won't go into too much detail for each player specifically for their season recap, but I'll do it for these guys that I've started for the season and held right up until the end. Now I will quickly just count them out. So Nick Martin's 1, Dacos is 2. Who else is there? Bond 3. Tom Green 4. Who else is there? Gawn 5. Flanders was a trade-in. I think I traded him in round 3. Jackson is 1 I started. So yeah, there's about 6 players there. Heaney's another one, so 7. Outside of that, everyone else I traded into my team. So I should try and track down my team from last year and see how it compares. But yeah, it's crazy. But yeah, going back to Nick Martin, a lot of people jumped off him. Round 3, his ownership dropped from 20% to 15%, and then rose all the way up to finish with an ownership of 30.7%. So I think he was a success. I would have been kicking myself. I mean, in that round that I got rid of, decided to keep Nick Martin. I actually got rid of Hayden Young that round. So I probably should have kept Hayden Young on reflection. And I think that's probably one of the key learnings is, not following the crowd in this case. And I think, thinking back to when I traded out Hayden Young, he was facing a massive price drop, and trying to look forward, knowing that he was going to drop in price. I was like, well, if I hold him and the majority of the competition get rid of him, and if he doesn't turn his form around, then, I'm going to be stuck behind the 8 ball. So even though my gut was telling me to keep him, I went with the crowd virtually. You know, a bit of a sheep followed that. And I think, yeah, key takeaway there is just to back in your gut, really, because, you know, that would have served me well. Whether or not I would have kept him for the rest of the season, don't know, maybe not. But I think for the early part of the season, at least, he, you know, turned things around. And I know he battled with, I guess, in terms of how he's being played and being coached. You know, the times there where he stuck forward, other times he was required to go back in defence, which was early on in the season. And that was part of the reason why I opted to punt him as well, because his role had looked like it had changed. And then it was disposal efficiency was a massive issue. But you compare it with Nick Martin, who I held, whose disposal efficiency was a major issue throughout the entirety of the season. He was still able to score well. So looking at Young here, you know, he turned things around. There were times there where he still scored, you know, below tons. He wasn't the sort of pick that we were projecting him to be. Late in the year, he kind of turned things around and had a 6-game consecutive streak of tons with a couple of 120 plus games there. But yeah, I think I probably would have traded him at some point in the season. But I'll go through as well, after going through sort of the individual breakdown of these guys that I've started and kept through the season. I will go through the trades week by week and just sort of quickly note whether or not it was a win or it was a loss, or, you know, if it was guys that I'd traded out too early in terms of cash cows, or, you know, had I missed guys, you know, so on and so forth. So we will get into that. Nicky Dacos. So the big conundrum here for little Nicky was the fact that he was going to face Hawks, or the Hawks in round 4. And of course, we were worried about that, the tagging risk that came with that game due to McGuinness obviously having a favourable history against him as a tagger. As it turned out, it probably would have been a good thing to not start him. I mean, you look at his breakdown in scores and pricing there. He got tagged in the second game from memory. I think it was Winhager tagged him in round 2 against the Saints. He started the season quite well, 131 against the Giants in round 0, 135 in round 1 against the Swans, and then had that 54 score in round 2, which again came at a really terrible time because, you know, that score stayed in his price cycle for 1, 2, 3 price cycles, and it meant that his price dropped from 650 all the way down to 566. Which was his lowest price point for that early part of the season. So a lot of people would have, at least those people that didn't start him, would have picked him up at a very, very nice discount, around about 90 odd, 84k quick sums. So yeah, it's one of those things where it's hard to predict, and, you know, some people might say that, yeah, like it was, you know, you're staring him in the face with the Hawks there in round 4, but, you know, with the opening round, I think that threw a bit of a spanner in the works as well. Just quickly on the opening round, I think strategy-wise, it really prompted me to rethink guys, whether or not I started them or, you know, potentially didn't start them and hope that I'd bring them in after they played a stinker, all that sort of stuff. And there were so many round 0 guys that I wanted to start, but I just couldn't fit into my team. And just moving forward just quickly, Sam Flanders is definitely one of those guys. I was so bullish on him. I remember at the start of the season, even the preseason, off the back of his practice games, Sam Flanders was someone that a lot of people had cold feet on, and I was very, very bullish with him. But the reason I didn't start him was the fact that, you know, I wish I had my starting team I could show you, but there was players that, you know, if I started Flanders in my team, it would have meant that I wouldn't have been able to start, you know, potentially the likes of a Gawn and Grundy, who again was a matchup and a combo that I was very bullish on. And again, it probably would have meant that if I had started Flanders, I wouldn't have had the coin to start Dacos. So it was really, from memory, it came down to both of those guys. And I think Dacos, knowing his pedigree, knowing what he can produce, and the fact that he's, you know, had that consistency in his game over the entirety of the season last year compared to Flanders, who kind of came good in the back part of 2023. I was like, I'll back in little Nicky, and, you know, hopefully he has good games up until that Hawks game, and it gives you those points in the bank, especially considering that he's playing that round 0 opening round. So let us know as well, as I'm recording this, for those people watching live, what was your strategy when it came to round 0? Because I know that it threw me, and, you know, having my time again, and no doubt the AFL are going to absolutely stuff us over again in 2025 and continue this stupid, ridiculous opening round. But I think the key takeaway for me going into next year is just to back in my gut and really prioritise those guys to bring in and start. Because had I started Flanders, it obviously first and foremost would have allowed me to keep a trade, but it would have also allowed me to bank those nice scores that he had first up, where he scored a 124 against Richmond, who I should go back to my preseason predictions as well for teams that I thought, where they were going to rank in the ladder. And I had Richmond, I think it was second last or last, and I knew they were going to struggle this year, and I thought, okay, well, Flanders is going to have a nice game against them, especially on his home ground there at People First Stadium. And then Adelaide scored a 128, 124 against the Tigs and went on from there. And as we know with Flanders, he scored a ton all the way from round 0 all the way to round 20, where upon, just funnily enough, he scored a 91 against the Eagles and then a 93 against the Dons, and then bounced back with a 120 and a 161 this week, of course, against the Tigs, who he finished the season with and started the season with. So, yeah, that's probably one thing that I'd like to have a bit of a do-over with, because by the time I got him in my team, and it was in round 2, and I actually traded Hayden Young, who I spoke of earlier. I traded Hayden Young to Flanders, and it allowed me to get him in, but get him in at an inflated price point of 34k above his starting price. So, it mightn't seem like much, but, 34k in the grand scheme of, the course of the season can be a fair amount. So, yeah, that's pretty much that. But Little Nicky is what it is. Let us know as well if you're watching, if you started Dacos or if you brought him in after that Hawks game, where I know there was a few people that did it, and they were, singing from the hills that they didn't start him. So it would have given you a leg up over the rest of the competition. That is for sure. Next player, didn't start with him, but Luke Ryan, 114. He's the sort of player who it turned into a frustrating pick, really, because I ended up getting him into my team. Would have been almost his highest price point. I think it was around, and again, we'll go through the week-by-week trades, but from memory, I think it was around about round 9, after he scored that 197 ridiculous score against the Tigs in round 8. So I got a nice sort of run of scores, 111, 122, 132, and a 124 from Ryan, but then he ended up having that lean patch where he only scored a ton over the course of the next 7 weeks, and then finally bounced back round 21 against the Dons, 126, 156 against the Cats, then another down game in round 23 against the Giants, a 68, and then finished the season with that 114 against the Power this round. So all in all, I think another takeaway here is the fact that, and people have spoken about it in the live stream previously as well, and listening to Dr. Supercoach and a few other content creators out there. And Dr. Supercoach actually made a really good point about this. Both the guys on there, they were talking about, when is almost the point of no return when it comes to the price point of specific players and when you bring them in. And I obviously got in Luke Ryan when he was, 644? He would have been, or 666, which was virtually his highest price point, or 20k below his highest price point, which was a ridiculous 686.7. And the guys and Dr. Supercoach made a really good point. They're like, well, almost the threshold, I think, and they spoke about the 600k mark. And it's poignant because if you compare it with Flanders, who, as we know, scored a ton every single week up until round 20, he actually dropped in price in round 17 to the tune of almost 40k, because of the fact that his average was 119 up until this point of when his scores dropped from a consistent, 110 plus. It went down to below 110 over a 2-week period, and he dropped 35k or thereabouts. So again, he was like 640 odd K or whatever, but you've just got to remind yourself that the higher price of a player and the higher price that a player is, the harder it is for them to maintain their price point, even if their average is quite high. All they need is, a couple of games back to back, or even, sort of bookended over a 3-week period where, they're at least 10 points below their season average, and they'll actually drop in price. So you've just got to have that patience about it. And I know like it's easy to say because, it's, you've got to almost try and work out when the guys are going to have a bit of a down game, which for Flanders, in his case here, it was almost impossible because he he was just on that massive run of form. So yeah, crazy stuff. But they, again, made a really good point, and I think I'll try and use it for next year. Is don't reach for those guys that are at a really ridiculous price point because you'll end up, first and foremost, I guess squeezing a lot of money that you've got in your bank that you could be using elsewhere, but also, you're virtually shooting yourself in the foot because, it doesn't happen all the time, but as we saw with Ryan, there are positional changes. There is form tapering over the course of a 24-round season. It's very, very hard to try and maintain those, those scores over a lengthy period. So that is something just to keep in mind. It's something that I think, when a player passes a 600k mark, I'll kind of think twice about bringing them in. It was hard as well with Ryan, I will say, because his ownership was getting up there. By the time I got him in, he actually jumped up like 11%. So it was kind of like, I guess hedging my bets in a sense, because at that point of the season, everyone was going to jump on him after that Richmond game. And it was just, keeping up with the Joneses, as it were. Like, we don't want to fall behind. But yeah, it's been a very, very strange end to the year. Before I go into the next couple of players and those that I've started the year with and kept for the entirety of the year, let's just quickly go back through the comments. We will do this intermittently, of course, but Adam, you've said, did you throw the ball? No, I didn't. Whoever did that at the game, absolute numpties. You don't be doing that, especially like the poor goal umpire who, innocent party, just trying to do his job. But I will say, number 32, dickhead. But no one deserves a bottle. That sort of stuff. That's just feral behaviour. Crazy fit flaggers. No, I don't think so, mate. Very fortunate to make finals, and only off the back of the work of Port Adelaide, really. Crazy fit was a good throw. Carl got 143 off the VC. Well done, mate. And he was the worst of all options I looked at this week. Who would that be that you're referring to there? 143. He's not in my team. But that was kind of the frustrating thing for me as well. As you can see there, Bont was my VC and Butters was my C. I was expecting at least a 125 plus from Butters, 10 points below what I was expecting. But you look at my team, and I'll admit, and I won't use it as an excuse, but I was on the way back from Bali, heading to the airport when the Collingwood game was on against the D's. And what I should have done, just more in line with my Cash League Grand Final that I was in, which I ended up losing, unfortunately, by around about 20-odd points. I would have won had I put the VC on Dacos because my opponent did, and it would have given me, the points difference virtually. So, yeah, I probably should have done that because Collingwood with nothing to play for, likewise Melbourne being knocked out of finals contention, it did mean that, there was incentive there for Collingwood to really put the pill in the hands of Dacos as often as possible to try and give him the 3 votes, given that he is in Brownlow contention. So I should have looked at that a little bit closer, but I was in holiday mode, the brain was in holiday mode, and I'd kind of already checked out, as I said earlier, from SuperCoach by and large, despite the fact it was a cash league. And my opponent was a Pies fan as well, so I should have known that they'd put the VC on him. Should have hedged bets, didn't do it, but yeah, VC and C, it came back to bite me in the latter part of the year, I think. I started to take too many risks. There were some times where I was a bit too conservative and, opted for guys that were awfully safe, and then, found out guys that I probably should have taken a risk on, scored better, and then, the adverse happened where, I took a calculated risk, because I always like to think they're calculated because it's backed up by numbers and data, which, as you know, I'm a massive bloody number nerd with. But, they didn't come off, and there were guys there that were probably regulation type VCs, like Bont the other week when he went bananas, and I faded him. Excuse me, and I went, I think it was Dacos. I know it was Flanders VC into Dacos C, it might have been, the 2 young guns, and yeah, that week where I missed out on Bont's massive score when a vast majority of the competition put the VC on him. You've just got to be smarter with that. So I think that's something that I need to sort of pay more attention to throughout the season, and yeah, know when to hold them and know when to fold them, of course. As well as the saying goes. Excuse me, a bit of the old voice box isn't working well again. Number 32, your fault, mate. But Rod Todd, good to have you joining us, mate. Craze Fit, Guns and Rookies. Adam, you said I've waited too long to bring in players to not keep up their good scores and dropped players too quickly after poor scores. Another year of learning. And as I said earlier, like in that category that you mentioned there of dropping guys too quickly off the back of poor scores, like Nick Martin's one that a lot of people dropped. Hayden Young's another one. Excuse me. Yeah, it's one of those things where it's almost a bit of a guessing game to try and work out whether or not you're dropping plays, whether you should do it, do you follow the crowd if the majority of the competition are doing it, and so on and so forth. But yeah, it's one of those things that I think it's. You look at this, the early part of the season when we had 40 trades, like that number of 40 trades, you see that and you're like, well, I can take risks. I can get rid of guys that aren't performing well. So yeah, it's one of those things where you kind of get lulled into a false sense of security with these extra trades, and no doubt a majority of the competition, fell into that boat there, and I was one of them when it came to Hayden Young. Double dummy. Hey, mate. Well, that ends a weird year. Hope you fared well. Thanks, mate. Didn't fare too well, it must be said. And I'll go through the breakdown of my season as well. I might do that next, just to keep things fresh, so we're not just going through players that we know how they've scored and everything else. And then we might go into trades and whatnot and recap that. But yeah, it was a shitful end to the year for me. And a lot of people would have been in the same boat as well, just with injuries, copping donuts. And it really takes the wind out of your sails off the back of, all the work you've done for the majority of the year, building your team, trying to get the best primos in. And then, it just comes unraveling when, you've had 40 trades and you think, oh, yep, this is going to be fine. And then there's carnage, as there always is. There's always carnage in the back end of years, but the carnage that we faced this year, I think, was probably one of the worst that we've seen in recent times. Like, I remember last year we were talking about, Tom Green did his hammy, Walsh was out, Doherty was out. Like, there was so many different key players that were out, but I just felt as though like it hit really bad over the course of a 2-week period with Gawn, with Rankine, and so on and so forth, where there was so many guys that were out. Like Charlie Curnow's another one, combined with form. Sheasel, of course, as well. So, yeah, it's been a very, very weird season, that's for sure. Josh, good to have you joining us, mate. Hope you're well. You scored 2,643. Well done, mate. You absolutely smashed it. Carl, you've said KPF. Ideally, max sub 400k before a good fixture run. That's key position forwards, of course. Mid, unless you're closing an absolute anti-pod, 550k. Dom a dozen. Mid forward, 450. Defender, 500 to 550. What are you referring to there? Sorry, Carl. It might have been in reference to something I was chatting about a bit earlier. Double dummy, good score, mate. 2622 with Stewart on field as well. Well done. And having to take Humphreys for Sheasel and Segsy for Heaney. Mate, you had a very nice week considering, so well done to you. Josh, you finished the year at 126, so tip of the old cap to you, mate. You've done very, very well there. I remember that you were in a position there where you were like, do I trade guys? Do I hold firm? All that sort of stuff. So good to see you finish strongly, mate. Double dummy. Also, there was a post in Facebook, but no link in the comments. Thanks, mate. I've whacked that up on, I think it might have been Serious Supercoaches, that page that you're referencing there, where they don't allow you actually to embed links in their posts. So, and the posts don't go up instantaneously. They go up through moderation, which is manual. So, unable to do that until it is approved. And sometimes the posts don't get approved for hours on end. So apologies, mate. I didn't see that go live until now. But You've said, oh, yeah, scratch that. The link is there now. Josh up the Saints, and good work to your mob as well, getting the win. Yeah, just heartbreak from my mob as always, but very lucky, as I said, to make finals. But a very nice win and performance from your mob. Double dummy 143 was Jezza. Oh, okay, yep, Jezza. He would have been a very nice trade in. And I remember when Curnow was being bulk traded in, and there were some people that were like, do I go for Curnow? Even when Curnow was out, do I trade him to Jezza? There are those guys, I think, late in the year where you can kind of bring them into your team based upon matchups. But it's hard because you later in the season as well, you're trying to plug holes. There's always guys that are being rested, being injured. And you want to always get the top line plays in your team where, like, Jezza wasn't really, it must be said. Like, he obviously had a very nice matchup against the Eagles without McGovern and Barras being there, and always was going to smash out a big score. But yeah, it comes a point in the season where you've got to like re-strategize and be like, well, especially for cash leagues as well. That's kind of where these guys become ever more important when it comes to the head-to-head games. Carl, you've said a smile is just a frown turned upside down. Damo, this community looks to you for leadership and strength. If you start to show signs of weakness, the rank and file will lose their heads. Nah, yeah, it's one of those things as well. And a bit of a shout out as well to JD of Fantasy Take TV, who, if you haven't seen it, check out a video he's put out on YouTube, and he said that he's finishing up content creation for the near future at the very least. And he's a guy that I've really enjoyed his content because, his strategy and outlook on SuperCoach is very in line with what I do. It's very analytical, very, very data driven, and using numbers to really back in your strategies and the way that you structure up from week to week, starting team, everything else. But he spoke about in terms of the drain that being a content creator can have, and go into the season with 100%. It's kind of like an iPhone battery or a phone battery where you're just 100%. And over the course of the season, it wears you down a bit, and life gets in the way and everything else, and work and everything. And part of this, I think that I'm very fortunate with, is content creation ties in with what I do with my day job and my own business, which is as a videographer and video editor. So this comes part and parcel with me, and I don't really see it much of a drainer. But when it comes to SuperCoach, you do lose a bit of, and it's natural as well. We're the same as you. When you start to get injuries and stuff, and you hit for six when you're having to gobble donuts and stuff, you just lose a bit of motivation and stuff. But I'm always someone outside of SuperCoach that likes to see things through, so that's naturally part of the reason why I am continuing on, and will always be. And of course, I'm a SuperCoach and fantasy nut, so that's virtually it. Josh, good game to watch. It was, mate. It was. It would have been better as a Saints fan, but it's just deja vu. 2022 against the Pies. Yeah, getting beaten under a kick. It's this mob, really. My team. They like to torture us. Adam, when can we pluck your Brownlow knowledge? Damo, has Dacos pinched it from Crips? We'll have to go through. Now they've got a bit more time, especially over the pre-finals bye. I'll go through and have a bit of a squeeze of the votes that I've been giving out for those games that I've watched, and try and go back through. And I am in a group with other people that we collate Brownlow votes and stuff, and got a bit of a combined spreadsheet, bit of Excel wizardry. So yeah, we'll work it out. But I think if I was a guessing man, I would say it would be between Dacos and without any bias, Cripper. I think both of those guys are primed to finish with a Brownlow around their neck. Just comes down to whether or not, and as we saw last year and every single year, the umpires, they just can't be trusted in terms of, even games with standout plays and stuff where they should be given, hands down 3 votes, and they're only given a 2, 1. Even Neil last year when he, I think it was like a 12 to 14 disposal game, was ineffective, and he was given like 2 to 3 votes, and it's just like, what the hell? So there is a bit of human error and bias that comes into it, I have no doubt. But we'll jump into that on the Discord as well. Might post some of my thoughts in there if anyone is keen to join, and let us know if you don't have the Discord link. I might actually grab that whilst we're here, and I will whack it in the comments section. So you can join our community and, of course, be ready to go, ready and raring to go for season 2025. I just want to give a bit of a quick shout out as well. Sorry, there's so many things that are running through my mind I need to sort of get off the top of my head now whilst I'm here. So apologies for the back and forth, but just want to thank everyone whilst it's front of mind for tuning in from week to week, not just for. And we'll have these formalities as well in the final weekly episode with Liam. But whilst I've got everyone here that likes to tune into my team talk videos themselves, like to thank you for giving me your time and everything else, and investment. Likewise, jumping on the live streams, everything else. So really can't thank you enough, because it's great fun to really, pick the brains of other people in the community as well, and provide a bit of entertainment when we can as well. So I'll whack the Discord link down below, and feel free to join if you haven't already. Double dummy outside of Stewart, 33, Humphreys, 47, and Sexton, 69. Ding ding, that's quite funny. My worst score was Greens 96, still only 1400th for the year. Won 5 grand finals, but overall is the goal. Well done, mate, on the grand final wins. But you'll get there, mate. It was a very, very hard year, and I think it's in terms of the years that I've played, and I've been playing all the way back, would have been 2005 potentially. So I'm coming up to 20 years of playing SuperCoach next year. So time flies, and as I always say, there's never a year where you go away, not with key takeaways and key learnings and stuff. You're always learning, you're always adjusting, and as we've seen with this year, with the AFL bringing in like round 0 and the early buys, everything else, like you've just got to be adjusting all the time. As frustrating as it is, but you'll bounce back, dummy, and you'll be up there again next year. Carly, you said you still had a great year, and when using the trade, and when you're pushing the trading to the limit, when you get the black swan stuff, you can be a bit susceptible, but pushing hard is what propels you to the front in the first place. It's a fine line, and nobody saw this week coming. Yeah, I think it's one of those things. It's a bit of a catch-22 as well when it comes to being a content creator. You can't use it as an excuse, but it's one of those things where, and a bit of a, when you're sort of weighed up alongside, you're going for overall, but you're also going for leagues as well. Like there's a completely different strategy for both. And, conserving trades and being more mindful of that is the name of the game when it comes to leagues. But overall, you're gunning from the get-go and trying to upgrade your team as quickly as possible, and adjusting and using trades a bit more willy-nilly. So, yeah, it's definitely something that you have to keep in mind. But as a content creator, I will say that, you're kind of more mindful of being a bit more calculated and not taking silly, or at least, bit more calculated, but taking those risks that you probably normally wouldn't, because you want to try and get ahead of the pack and so on and so forth. So it is what it is. It happens, but that's that. Double dummy, it's tough. I've learned to ration trades, but it always leaves me too far back of those that go mega hard early. I'm just not good enough. I will say one tactic that I've used now for the past the past 3 years. And that's using trades and boosts early on. And I think that, considering that you start the season with 40 trades, I think people they view boosts as something that's a bit of a holy grail, but it shouldn't. And I think a lot of people should be using it to their advantage to try and upgrade their team as quick as you can, just to sort of get a bit of a leg up over the rest of the competition. So as you're referring to there, double dummy, apologies. Let me get my because I have a little bit of asthma, considering that my voice is absolutely cooked. Just give me a moment. Don't want to be gasping for air on live stream. Like an absolute dweeb with my asthma pump. But if you're an asthmatic, you know exactly what it's like. But anyway, as you mentioned there, double dummy. It's a strategy that I think has kept me in good stead. And if it doesn't work out, just know that you've got bulk trades to get yourself out of a pickle. And I think it's a calculated risk, where I think those people that have held their boosts for later in the season, they're already behind the 8 ball. And I think the first season when they brought the boosts in, I was more conservative, and it actually shot me in the foot, because those people that used boosts early on to get themselves ahead of the pack, I was left trying to play catch up, and just never was able to do it. So last year was the first year that I was a bit more shooting from the hip when it came to boosts, and it kept me in good stead in this year as well. Double dummy. Lockie Neal had a hell of a second half of the year, and that's the thing. Like, you've always, like, there's guys that, and it always happens with that don't look as if they'll be like a top 8 mid come the end of the year, and then they just burst out of the blocks and come good. Goulden was another one. He kind of faltered towards the back end, but Lockie Neal is 100% definitely one of those players that he just burst out of nowhere and wasn't getting tagged, which again, it was part of the reason why I didn't opt for him, because I already had enough of these taggable players in my team, like Butters, Merritt especially, Sarong, Walsh, who got virtually tagged every single week, despite the fact that Cripper would absolutely kill it. Rosie, another one. So, yeah, it was a bit of a strange one, and again, it's one of those things that you can't really factor in if opposition coaches aren't tagging players like Neal. It's like, well, do I get him in my team? And I imagine there was those coaches out there that brought Neal into their team the exact same week that he started getting tagged over the past sort of fortnight. So yeah, it's one of those things. It's always a guessing game, and you always have to adjust for that. AQN, thanks for joining us. You've said Neal a chance at the Brownlow, I reckon. Yeah, potentially. But he was gifted a Brownlow last year. It must be said, I reckon Bont was very, very unlucky. He should have won it last year. And having said that as well, with Cripps, I reckon he's had a better year than he did when he won the Brownlow. And I was very surprised he won the Brownlow that year that he did. Carl Meany, being serious for a minute, it's not just so much about trading cadence. The best coaches just tend to make the soundest decisions. They're better at distinguishing between the signal and the noise and not falling for the average blokes just on a 3-week heater. Yeah, that's totally right. Totally right. And it's one of those things where you've got to block out, as you said, the outside noise when it comes to the rest of the competition and guys that are being spoken about. I remember that, I forget the bloke's name, but the young rookie from Gold Coast, people jumped on over Garcia from the Bulldogs, and I was ranting and raving, and I'm like, go for Garcia, go for Garcia. I know he's being coached by Bevo, but he's going to be a bit more of a sound player. He's been in the system for 3 to 4 years compared to, I forget this guy's name from Gold Coast, who played, a good first game or second game and then ended up getting dropped for his 4th game, I think it was. And people had to hold him and then trade him out with reduced cash generation. And it's that sort of under the surface stuff that, hopefully that we can provide here at SuperCoach Edge, but other coaches that are more experienced as well, that know that's that sort of that edge, pardon the pun, that can really get you ahead of the rest of the competition when it comes to cash cows, primos, guys that are on, as you said, like a 3-week heater, or is it going to be sustainable? All that sort of stuff. So yeah, it's definitely key learnings that you kind of acquire over time. That's for sure. Jack, another legend, mate, regular of ours. Good to have you joining us. You've said g'day. How are you doing? Hungover day for me here after another wedding. We're very glad Blues still made the top 8. Thank you, mate. And we'll be face off against, I think, are you a Lions man potentially, Jack? Apologies if you're not, but we're facing off against the Lions, which is going to be an incredibly tough ask. Double dummy, you've said that's the skill I like, just referring to what you've mentioned there, Carl. Adam, while you're at it, Damo, what's that other page that posts those good videos about the Blues? Mate, I've got to get you as like my virtual PR man, because you're very good at prompting me for these things. You are referring to, of course, the next channel that I will be sort of delving and dedicating a bit more time to, and it is my dedicated Carlton YouTube page, which is Blue Baggers Edge, where I do post review and preview videos of games, and heading into the postseason, which will no doubt come after this week against the Lions. I'll be delving into a bit more about where things went wrong for the team, guys that we should target in the trade period, in the draft, all that sort of stuff. So if you are a bit of a a bit of a fellow bagger yourself, or you'd like to just pick my brain about because I will try and chat about generally other footy teams as well, because no doubt those players that I'm hoping we target in the trade period, obviously they come from other teams as well. So feel free to jump across to that, subscribe. You can just go there, watch it, click away if you don't like it, all that sort of stuff. But it is Blue Baggers Edge. I'll pop the link in the comment section as well. Double Dummy, you've said Pommy and Oz is good for a Blues man. He is indeed. I actually had him on stream. It would have been... I had a live with him, and it went for 3 hours. There you go. It was the review after the Hawks game. And yeah, we had a massive yarn, a massive yarn. And it was great as well because he's, again, an analytical guy and loves the Baggers as much as me. And yeah, really good bloke and a cracker. Where are we? But thank you, Adam, for jogging my brain there. Carl, Neil, Bont, Dacos, you'd guess. Cripps should poll well late for the Brownlow. Jack, you've said, got knocked out of my main cash leagues last week by 10 points combined. Geez. So still a bit shattered, but still received 200 per league for finishing first. So we'll still take that. Very nice, mate. Yeah, I ended up taking away, I think it was about 650 for finishing runner-up in my league as a losing grand finalist. So, and I was top point scorer as well, and I think I was ahead by around about 550 odd points on overall. But of course, we know the nature of head-to-head leagues, and anyone can win on their day. So even though I had by far and away one of the more dominant teams, just it wasn't to be on the day. Jack, how was Bali? Have a few been? No, I actually had one bintang when we were out at a very, very nice Greek restaurant. I had some incredible areas to go and eat there in Seminyak and Canggu we went to. So yeah, it was incredible. So yeah, if you haven't been to Bali, I definitely recommend it, mate. Definitely recommend, especially if you're from Perth. I think it's only like a 3 or 4 hour plane trip. It's virtually the equivalent of traveling from Perth to Melbourne or to Brisbane. So yeah, it was a very, very nice trip. But back on deck now. Adam, it ain't easy being wheezy, my missus says, as a fellow wheezer, by the sounds of it yourself, Adam, or potentially your missus. Hopefully you are keeping well there with the asthma. Carl, Jake the Snake Rogers, that's him. Jake Rogers, yeah, absolute turkey, and we all looked past the small forward, middle of the road team. Average job security. I feel for him sadly, and the Garcia made heaps more cash and was fieldable. Yeah, he's someone that I'll hang my hat on, and I was very, very bullish on. And when people... I mean, we always love to give advice here, but for those people, especially in my leagues, that opted to go for Jake the Snake, I was rubbing my hands together. And I'm like, they obviously don't tune into our content because they missed out on Garcia, who made a fair bit of cash and, nice bit of cover as well. Jack, up the Lions. I think they'll be so hungry as you beat us at the Gabba in round 0. Yeah, they'll be out for some revenge, that's for sure. But yeah, good to see the Lions have made it. And they're still my tip for the flag. They're still my tip, even though they finished outside the top 4. I think I'd like to see them make it and win a flag because they were very, very unlucky last year. Let's dip back into the team here before this stream goes for 3 hours. So Dan Houston was someone I brought in. I actually traded Tom Stewart for Dan Houston and ended up being one of the worst trade-ins. I traded out Stewart when he went into his bye, which was round 18 from memory. And actually, no, sorry, it was round 14, because that was the round where Houston went bang, scored a 174. And I was like, feeling like King Dick. I'm like, here we go. I've traded Stewart, who's been in some really terrible form, getting tagged, playing in defense. Traded him to Houston, who's kind of been a very nice price point, the lowest price point of which I thought he might have been. At 566, looked like a bargain. Mind you, he dropped down to a season low 506 in round 21. But after that 174, he only scored 5 tons over the next 10 rounds, or 9 rounds. So it was really annoying. And of course, Houston being rubbed out for the final round meant that I virtually had to gobble a 0 because even though I had McKercher back in defence to allow me to cover him, it meant that I was not able to throw another player forward. and swing things around to cover the Curnow egg donut. So yeah, Houston, bad trade in, I think. And it was, I should have again followed my gut, gone with my own advice that I always say when it comes to players that don't really have a high ceiling and they struggle for a high floor and they have a really big deviation in their scoring. Houston historically has been that sort of player up until I guess the latter part of last year, and he actually, to his credit, had a really nice season, and I got fooled by that. And there were signs there where he scored pretty low, a 77 against North Melbourne, a few games there as well below tons, and I kind of was like, you know what, he's at a sort of relatively high ownership of 23%, and at a very nice price point is what I thought that he dropped down to, and I thought, yeah, I've got to get him in, and yeah, there wasn't really much I could do because Stewart came back into the team, and as we know, started being gifted CBAs and really wasn't getting a tag. Was a bit of a hybrid midfielder and defender, which, mind you, was the role that he was being shown to play in the preseason, which, if that was the case, he would have been a definite lock and load. And even though I started in my team, I probably shouldn't when it comes to Stewart, but with role changes and stuff, you've got to adjust, and you really can't foresee that sort of stuff. And it's one of the below surface parts of SuperCoach that you can't plan for at all until it happens. So yeah, that is Houston. Wayne Miller, I brought into my team early on and looked like a relative bargain. I think it was around about round 7 or 8, and was pretty consistent, I must say. Like, he scored. His lowest score was 79, and prior to that, an 81 over the course of the season when I brought him into my team. So, yeah, a few tons there. He had a really high floor, but not so much a high ceiling. So, provided a little bit of security, helped me in head-to-head matchups and stuff. But, yeah, probably if I had my time again, probably wouldn't go on for NWM. McKercher, I brought into my team. He was in and out, a bit of a, yo-yo. And, I traded him out of my team round 6, and then he came back, smashed it, and then got injured in round 9, and then came back round 17, brought him back into my team, and was rested a week there. And, aside from that, he was actually a really good pickup late in the season, so was happy with that. Zach Reed I actually kept for the entirety of the year, ended up getting injured, and then came back through the VFL, did his pectoral muscle injury, and he wasn't really much help either for loopholing. Was maybe for a week or two there, but wasn't really of much use. Into the midfield, so Bont, everyone virtually started him, and again, I was weighing up not starting him, and probably would have been a ridiculous call for me to do that. Mind you, he actually dropped, and this is going back to what I spoke about earlier, with players at a really high price point, chances are that they're going to drop in price. I knew that was going to happen with Bont, given that he was was starting at 724.6, which is ridiculous. Even though he started quite well, first 2 games, 126 and 136, he then had a 110 in round 3 in his 3rd game, and that's when his his price started to drop, and he ended up dropping down. It was around about 80k in total, and then it was 110k in round 7, where his price then went upwards again. So for those higher, like super high priced players, I will probably think twice about starting them in my team next year. So I'd like to hear what your thoughts are, but I think, when we talk about guys at a high price point and trying to save pennies, all that sort of stuff, and weighing it up against, not starting a guy, but then having to bring them into your team to, waste virtually a trade to get them in, you would have saved 100k there had you done that with Bont. And he was always going to drop in price, and it was going to happen, the first, sort of third of the season, you would think, at some point or another. So if that happens next year, I'll think twice about starting these high price guys. Butters, I spoke about him. He was my trade in, and it was pretty good. I think it was in the second half of the year, and had some really nice scores there. 159, 120, 132, 131, 156. So, one of those guys that I wanted to start in my team, but considering he wasn't playing in round 0, I had to prioritise those guys. That was kind of my strategy. and I was always going to bring Butters in at some point. And yeah, ended up doing that. Tom Green, 96. As I said, started with him, and it looked like it was going to be a very, very nice call by me starting him because he was a round zero player. First three scores, 132, 152, and 137. And then he started to taper off, had a injury game there, scoring a 5, and his price plummeted to, mid 450s, which was just absolutely craziness. And then people started to jump back on him. Had some nice scores in the back part of the year, to his credit, so started to sort of recapture that form that he showed in the first 3 rounds towards the back end of the year. So I think that was an informed call. I know some people jumped off him, and I backed him in, which I think was fine to do, offset by the fact that he was so highly owned as well, so not too bad. Zach Merritt, 135. Really good get, and I think he is probably one of the more consistent performers when it comes to SuperCoach. Had a couple of down games there, which meant that his his price plummeted. And yeah, went down to, I think it was almost 100k cheaper than his starting price. But by and large, yeah, had some really nice scores. I think he was kind of lacking for ceiling scores in 2024. Still had a relatively high floor, but the ceiling scores, not so much. Dane Zorko, he was always planned, and I spoke about it early in the season, that he was going to be my last upgrade for my team, but I just couldn't ignore him. And I think I ended up bringing him in around about the midway point of the season. And again, had a really high floor, had some nice ceiling games, but they're kind of too, few and far between. But being one of the only forwards that were available of, primo status and primo quality, I just was forced to bring him in earlier than what I wanted, which was fine. And it was incredible because I thought, there was an issue with his durability. And as it turned out, he played every single game of the year. So just crazy, crazy stuff. Bucking the trend there in terms of injury-prone guys being super durable. So that's that. Sarong ended up bringing into my team. Would have been, I know a lot of people were jumping on Sarong after his start to the year where he scored a 170 and 141. And this kind of was along the same lines of what I was talking about earlier, where I didn't want to reach for him because he'd already gone up 36.7k at round 3 to 658. And I was like, he's going to drop, in price at some point over the coming weeks following that. And that happened because he scored a 94 and then he dropped around about 40k over the next 3 weeks. And then I jumped on him and he had a really nice run of form, 140, 137, 150, 118. Then it tapered off again. Big reason here was for the fact that he was being tagged, and he was being tagged ahead of Brayshaw, which for the first time was kind of a consistent thing. And that kind of went against the pick in a sense. It kind of evened itself out over the course of the year. Still was a very nice pick in isolation, but yeah, I think it was offset by the fact that he was so highly owned, so not bad in that respect. Where are we? We'll go back through to Walshy. So ended up bringing Walsh into my team around about the same time that people were deciding to bring in Dawson. Dawson started very, very slowly, had a very nice game early in the season. I think it might have been against us, actually. And people were choosing between him and Walsh. I went for Walsh. As it turned out, I think it was much for muchness. Dawson played a pretty ordinary season as well. I do believe that Walsh was battling for majority of the year with that back issue. Carlton have kind of been very coy on that. But yeah, there were times there late in the season. Game against, who was it? It would have been Port Adelaide. I remember in my reserve seat, I sit just down from the bench. He ran off and was rubbing his lower back. Obvious issue. The club came out and said, no, he just copped a cork in his hip. And I'm like, don't think that's the case, because there was numerous times where he'd come off and be rubbing his back. So not performing to the level of what we expect, and I do think he was underdone. So bit of a silly pick for me. I thought he was a very nice price point when I brought him in, he was at 566 or thereabouts. And yeah, his form was just too up and down. And as it turned out, the score that he had against the Saints in round 24 was, I think, his 4th highest score for the year. So, yeah, not a good pick there. Connor Rosie was a very, very nice pick. Good value, as we know, off the back of him being forced to play, not missing any time after doing his hammy against the Crows he was forced to play. He scored that 53, came back, scored a 39 against North Melbourne, and then was out again for 3 weeks. Then I jumped on him for his game back against the Giants, 75. Oh, sorry, it was Brisbane, because I knew his break even was quite high against the Giants, scored the 75, and then I was like, that's it, I'm jumping on. And then for the next 5 weeks, he scored 111, 103, 168, 105, and 113, and went back up around about 150k from the price that I got him. So it was a really, really nice value pick. And again, that is sort of an informed call based upon historically knowing what Rosie can score when he's at peak fitness. And I was just hopeful that he was back at peak fitness, and he was, and scored quite well. On the bench there, as you can see, I had Heaney, who was obviously a late out for the Swans, and I swung Dowling into the forward line to provide a little bit of cover there. Heaney, I started the season with as well, and had an incredible start to the year. Has traditionally been a burn man for me, I will admit, but considering that he was playing around zero, I was like, you know what, I'm backing it in. So he scored a 144, 136, 128, 148, 165 in the first 5 rounds of the season. So incredible stuff, and it meant that I'd saved a trade, whereas people that didn't start him obviously had to use a trade to bring him in, and I'd already banked those big scores as well. So really, really nice player. His form tapered in the back end of the year, scoring at 85, 72, 82, 75. Came good against the Pies around 22, 144, and then had a 117 against the Dons at around 23 before he was rested, which threw another spanner in the works for all of us owners. Revel, I ended up keeping for the remainder of the year. Didn't work out in the way that I wanted, because he was still scoring quite well, and he looked as though he had a very nice role in the Lions team. As they started to get guys back to peak fitness, he was then used as a sub. So it meant that his price point, which was still important for me because I was looking to potentially trade him to someone of equivalent value around about, he was priced at 13.7k in round 17. And then he had 3 consecutive sub games where his price plummeted back down to 195 and lost over 120k. So didn't work well for me. DPP player, someone that was getting games, all that sort of stuff. It just shows that things can change in the blink of an eye. So that was that. Rawlinson from the Eagles, he was my non-playing player, which really did help with locking in VCs, and as a DPP player allowed me to swing Dowling and the like for coverage if I needed it. Into the rucks, max score 122. I kept him for the entirety of the year. A lot of people traded him out when he ended up getting injured after round 17. Was out for those 2 games, came back for round 20, which was great. And I was kind of forced to keep him in a sense because I had to deal with Rankine, who was out, Curnow, and the like. So, yeah, it worked out in the end for me, whereas a lot of people traded him out. Tim English, when we're talking about guys that have one of the worst trade-ins of the year, he would rank right up there. He just swindled his way into the team because I thought he was a very, very nice price point when I brought him in, around about 550 odd, and then just his form tapered. And I think he was scoring a ton every second week virtually, and it just wasn't good enough. And yeah, obviously out for round 23, which didn't help cash leagues and head-to-heads, all that sort of stuff. And yeah, finished with an average of 108 for the season, which is absolutely putrid by his standards. So he's a burn man for me now, and I'm not touching him next year, especially considering that he's re-signed at the Dogs. Let's just quickly check back in into the chat, the comments. Double dummy, same, I think last year, Burns deep in them, referencing the Lions, of course. Bit of Carlton chat here from Carl. Do Blue supporters view this year as underachieving, or do you reckon it was a pass mark given the extensive injury list? Never had any real continuity with all the outs. I'll chat about it in Blue Baggers Edge on that channel there. Not to really hijack the SuperCoach chat here, but I do think it is a catastrophic failure, and with the injuries, we virtually only copped them, the bulk of them, in that Hawks game, which came after 6 weeks of just ridiculous form, the way that the coaches were using players at team selection, and then the way that the team was structuring up. It was just so many tactical errors and stuff that were being made this year as they were being made in the early part of 2023. So Yeah, it's a big issue there, big issue. But I'll again chat about that in extensive detail on the Blue Baggers Edge channel, which you can check out via the link that I've whacked in the comments section here on YouTube. Adam, you said, surely it's been a long time since Pies, D's, Bombers, and Tigs all missed the 8 at the same time. Random stat I've been thinking about. Yeah, I think you're right there, Adam. Yeah, it's very interesting. It's all the big Victorian teams have missed out, and yeah, Carlton were very lucky to make it. Let's continue on back on the Supercoach side of things. Look at the forwards. Nathan Kruger as well. He actually provided, I must say, at R3 and in the forward swings as well, a bit of coverage for Gawn being out when he was out. Scored a couple of 60 games and then had a shitful 56. So I had to use him round 19 against the Hawks as well for a score of 24. It was something, but it was equivalent to virtually gobbling a donut. So didn't really do much there. Flanders, but what he did provide as well, and the part of the reason why I kept him for the rest of the year was he provided the swing with Jackson, which I ended up using with English being out. Not that it really mattered because I had to gobble a donut anyway that week. But Flanders spoke about him, an incredible player, someone that I'm going to start next year. And I think there was word from L. Payton, it might have been, chatting about what his positional status may be going into 2025. Liam and I might try and chat about that ever so briefly as well, with a bit of a preview for 2025 and players that we're looking at. But he's definitely one. L. Payton mentioned that he might even be a forward defender or a mid defender as opposed to a mid forward, because he's not really playing any time forward. I think there was a couple of games there where he was late in the season, but yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what his positional status is going to 2025. But I reckon he's the next gen type player that we want to have in our teams, because as we saw, so consistent. So love a player with a high floor and a very high ceiling as well, and he is that. Caldwell I ended up bringing into my team a week later than what I should have. Brought him into my team, I think it was round 21. Then he scored a 55, 102, and a 53. So wasn't the sort of player that we're hoping to have late in the season. And yeah, part of that reason was the return of Parrish and just wasn't being utilised in the way that he was previously. Luke Jackson, spoke about him as well. A really good ruck cover. Part of the reason why he's still on my team. Otherwise, I probably would have traded him because he's tons with few and far between. He actually only scored 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 tons for the entirety of the year. A few games there in the 80s, 90s, but unless he's the number one ruck, he's not going to be scoring well. And even around 24, he was hardly used in the ruck because they were using Liam Reedy, I think his name is, the young sort of, or mature age he might be, ruckman. In the absence of Sean Darcy. And yeah, Jacko was made to play a bit more forward because they didn't have Tracy, who was injured. So yeah, Jackson was okay, probably more beneficial for that DPP coverage. Charlie Curnow, I went against, one of the number one rules that I always talk about when it comes to player selection, and that is avoiding key position players at all costs, in defence and forward. Part of the reason why I jumped on Charlie was the fact that it looked as though Carlton had a relatively soft draw to end the season, playing Richmond. The Giants and the Dogs were always going to be challenged, but North Melbourne, Collingwood, who he usually scores well against, and then Hawthorn, who at that stage were still looking like they were a side that you could beat. Yeah, just didn't work well at all. Twinged his ankle as well. Against the Giants in round 17 in the pre-game warm-up. Probably shouldn't have played. Had a terrible game. Scored a 33. Bounced back over the next 3 weeks with an 89, 106 and 119 against the Dogs, North and Port. But then finished the season with a 33 and 17 and obviously missing the last 2 games of the year. So not ideal there. And again, just a reminder that there are guys to avoid. And when it comes to key position players, I mean, outside of like single game matchups, which as we saw with Jezza, they're ones to avoid. Dowling provided a little bit of cover, much needed cover when he got the recall for round 24, scored a 62 to cover Rankine at least, who, as you can see there, sits on my bench, Rankine. And when we're talking about one of the worst trade-ins, I think he's probably right up there, but it's more due to misfortune. The week that I traded him into my team was round 17 against the Lions when he copped that 4-week ban for ironing out who was the player? I forget the player, but yeah, it was Starcevic, I think it was. But yeah, that absolutely shot me in the foot because I was deciding, I'm like, do I trade Rankine or do I keep him? That's the other player, sorry, I had in my team who I had to trade out that very week. It was Tookie Miller. So Took Miller injured his wrist. I'm like, I don't know when he's going to come back. I think the club was saying, Gold Coast was saying 4 to 5 weeks. And I'm like, well, at least I know Rankine's going to be back in 4 weeks' time, definitively. So held Rankine, scored a 76 on return, and then scored a 49, of course, being concussed himself against Port Adelaide. And again, this comes down to stuff that's out of your control. Had I known that was going to be the case, I obviously would have traded him and kept Miller, with Miller coming back. But yeah, I had to deal with Miller, Rankine, Gawn, all in the 1 week. And there was another player as well I traded to Caldwell. Can't recall who it was. But yeah, it was just a real, I guess, what is it? It's just a lot of misfortune. A series of unfortunate events is the phrase, and that's virtually what happened, and it culminated across like a 2 week period and just absolutely killed me. Joe Richards, as you can see there as well, he provided some nice cover, round 24, 74 when he wasn't the sub. Was the sub in round 22, which would have helped me, but came on and played literally 1 minute and scored a 0. So ridiculous sort of stuff there from McRae. But outside of that, had some okay scores as cover. Round 9, his first game, and his third game he scored 100 and a 60 in his second, and then was kind of just used as a sub and more of a traditional small forward, and his scoring was up and down. So that's that. And Will Dawson, as a lot of us had, traded him into our teams when he was ruled out for virtually the entirety of the year. Round 13, his third game, where a lot of us jumped on him as a bit of a cash cow. So yeah, still ended the season in 23% of teams as well. So that shows that we were just running short of trades and couldn't afford to get rid of him, considering that he was still bottom priced at 137.9k. Good old Will Dawson. But that's it. That's how my team structured up to end the year. There were guys there, which, as you mentioned there, Carl, Yo, Reed, Fife to an extent were huge for those who had them all. So I had Reed as well, which was good. But just in reference to Yo and Fife, part of the strategy that I always use every single year is avoiding those injury-prone players. And for those people that took the risk on Yo, took the risk on Fife, took the risk on McGovern as well, all injury-prone players who ended up scoring quite well and providing some nice scores, and being durable enough, really did catapult people up the ranks. And I think that was part of the reason and part of the difference is what was missing from my side as opposed to others. And part of the reason why my team stagnated a fair bit was because they were jumping on the likes of Yo, who was a relative pod, and Gov was another one. So yeah, again, if I had my time again, I'd do the exact same thing. I'd be avoiding Yo, avoiding Fife, all these guys that, get injured at the drop of a hat. And, it happened. Like, Yo got injured again. Fife ended up getting subbed, managed, had a niggle. So, yeah, you've got to back yourself in with the strategies, and I'll do it again next year. I'll be avoiding these guys because more often than not, it didn't happen this year, but more often than not, they get injured. And, yeah, it's something that I've kind of learned across the journey and won't deviate from. Carl, you said Yo in particular gave top line output at a very affordable starting price, and even when he inevitably missed, he still scored well before he missed, didn't get on board, was a disadvantaged Rankine. Was disadvantaged, you've said that, yeah, and that just speaks to what I was just referencing there, 100%. And you've said Rankine was a disaster late, but due to stuff you can't predict. The suspension, the injury, the combo was very tough. On output, he was a top 3 forward, so fully understandable to get on him. Yeah, 100%. And that's the thing, you can't kick yourself over that. And, I rue the fact that I kept him over Miller, but as I said, there was reasoning behind that, with Miller being ruled out for 4 to 5 weeks, as opposed to Rankine being ruled out for 4 weeks through suspension. And the fact that, as you say, in a position in the forward line that wasn't flush with good options, there was reason enough to hold Rankine and hope that he returned in some nice form. So yeah, it's one of those things. Just, again, incredibly bad luck, and I was dealt a fair bit, as other coaches out there were as well. Let's have a quick look at our history and the breakdown of obviously our trades, but first and foremost, how we performed positional wise and climbing the ranks. So it looks a very, very consistent type. I didn't actually get into triple figures, unfortunately, this year compared to last year. Started the season quite well, solid enough. 29,851st was my rank after round 1. Then I went to the 9,000s, 4,000s, 2,000s, and then round 6 I slid back to 4,000 over the next couple of weeks, and then in round 8 I started to gain some ground again, just inside the top 3, went to 2.7, 2.4, and then by round 11 I was 1.6 and 1.4, and as it turned out, that I was 1,453rd position in round 12, and I was tracking very, very nicely. And extrapolating that, I guess, ascent up the ranks into the future, I was predicting to potentially be inside the top 1K by around about the buys. As it turned out, round 13, I slid back and stagnated, and it's this point of the year where I want to kind of delve into and work out what the reasoning was. So I slid back to 2.1, 2.2, stayed around that mark, 2.6, and then I went down to 2.4, and then I just ended up sliding week after week virtually from rounds 18 all the way to round 24. I slid back from 3,000 to 24th, 3,047th, 3,081st, and then I had some big slides here off the back of donut games. 3,995th, 4,000th, 5,148th, and then finishing the season 5,859th. So again, that would kind of coincided with Gawn being out, Tookie Miller being out, Rankine being out, Charlie Curnow being out, English being out over the course of, that 5 to 6 week period. And yeah, it virtually scuttled any chance of me trying to ascend the ranks again. So that's the tale of the tape, but it's that point in the year, that round 13 point of the season, where I'd slid back from the highest point I'd been at, ranking-wise, 1,453rd, to then slide all the way down. So round 13, which is a bit of a segue here, let's have a look at our trading history. So let's just jump forward to round 13 and see what the reasoning was here and the moves that I'd made and see if there's any sort of correlation. So I think there's one big correlation here, and that is with English coming into the team, courtesy of Jordan Sweet. I will recall as well that that's round 12, I think it was. I ended up having to hold Sweet. I think Sweet was not recalled, I think. He was injured, obviously remember that. And then Hinkley hadn't brought him back into the team. I think he played Vicentini. And so I opted to gobble up a donut that round. And as it turned out, it actually worked out well because it allowed me to do a couple more moves. I think it allowed me to bring Butters in, I think it was. Round 11, it might have been. So that's part of the reason why I kind of stagnated there. Round 13, though. So English came in via Sweet. Closey I cashed in, brought Zorko in, which is good. And then I traded out Reed to Will Dawson to make some cash. And then round 14, I traded out Darcy Jones, who I wanted to keep, but I needed to trade someone to bring Dowling in from the Crows, so I did that. Cashed in Moyle to bring in Kruger. And then this is, again, a big reason. Round 14, when I slid in rank, traded out Stewart to Houston, who, yes, scored well in his first game for my team, but then was shit after that. So that's a big cross. McAuliffe I upgraded to Charlie Curnow this week here. Wasn't overly good first game for us, but then it had a couple of good games after that. Fraser I cashed in for Rawlinson, who was my non-playing player. And that allowed me to use cash on going Jai Clark in round 16 to Connor Rosie. So there were a couple of nice moves there, but still, ranking-wise, I wasn't going too well. So I ended up gaining a bit of rank off the back of that move with Rosie, but then I slid from that. Traded out Fisher to McKercher, and then Steele, who, again, was a luxury upgrade. Shouldn't have done it, but ended up doing it to bring in Rankine. So that in itself killed me because it meant that I obviously would have kept Steele, knowing, if Rankine was going to be out for 4 weeks, I wouldn't have done that trade. But That's the thing. It's just poor timing, really bad, unfortunate luck. Yeah, that's that. Round 18, I traded out Miller. Had to do it because he injured his wrist or his arm. Traded in Caldwell, which was an okay move for maybe 3 weeks out of the 5 or so weeks that I had him in my team. And then I had to trade out Sheasel to Sinclair with my last trade, which was okay. I think I was looking at potentially trading English to Romo, but as it turned out, English came out and played in round 24 anyway. So happy the fact that I went down Sinclair's route. Let's have a look at the early season trades. So you'll notice here as well, in terms of the strategy that I used, I ended up trading a lot of guys into my team that I identified as must-have cash cows. And that was kind of my name of the game for me this season. That was the new strategy that I brought into my my kit bag, you could probably say. So Gipkus injured, traded to Billings. I know a lot of people did that. That was a bit of a waste, as it turned out. Lazaro, a bit of a waste as well, but corrected him to D'Ambrosio, who was one of the best cash cows for the year, of course. And for those people that held him for longer, credit to you, because he was one of the better performers for the season. And then I traded out Fish as well, which I probably should have backed him in a bit longer, and probably goes to that same discussion point that I had earlier about Nick Martin and Hayden Young. Traded him to Tom Berry as a bit of a quick cash injection. Took a risk there. Again, lulled into the fact we had 40 trades. Tom Berry went out virtually the very next week. He made us a quick 45k or thereabouts, which was okay. I think his break even was a negative 50 or something like that. And being a small forward, that was a risk I knew going into it. I was taking, and didn't pay off, but at least he made a quick 45k. But having said that, we want players and cash cows to make minimum 100k. So yeah, a bit of a waste of a half a trade there, I will say. Sexton I traded out as well to Harry Sharp, which again was a player, another cash cow that was a must-have. So I used, you'll notice here a running trend over the early trades that I made. I actually used a boost on bringing in these must-have cash cows. So that was a real trend that I had, and something I identified in, how I was using the boost to my advantage. So I traded Sharp in, brought in Powell as well from North Melbourne, who was scoring quite well early on, and that correction trade of Young to Wangan and Miller. So there you go. That's the trade that I made there. And then round 4, I cashed out Windsor to Dempsey, even though it was only giving me like a 14k difference. Again, I was prioritising bringing in the must-have hot cash cows. So again, did that with Dempsey, Sharp, and D'Ambrosio. And then Darcy as well, I needed to bring into my team, and that was via James Jordan. So that was an okay trade. Round 5, didn't want to do it. Again, followed the crowd. Shouldn't have done it. Should have blocked the outside noise, as I normally do. Fell into a trap here. Traded out Grundy and switched Jackson into R2. And Howes, I ended up cashing in to allow me to bring in Steele. And, of course, Closey, who was a very nice cash cow at that point in the season. Round 6, Jack Carroll, who I started the season with, I used him to upgrade to Sarong, which was a very nice in at that stage. McKercher traded him out with a role change, potentially playing more time through the middle from memory, and of course being injured, to Jack Graham, Graham from the Suns. And then Sanders, poor bloke. I don't know how he didn't get many more games than what he did at the Dogs, but traded him to McAuliffe. Gave me some cash in the bank with a view for round 7 to trade and upgrade D'Ambrosio to Sammy Walsh. So that was a waste right there. That there, difference in price point there was 228, just quick maths, K that I invested from D'Ambrosio to Walsh. That is just crazy in itself. And round 7... it helped me, I think, in the short term, because I ended up going from ranked 4K to 2K. But, trading out Dempsey as well, I think at that point of the season, again, you've got to really guesstimate as whether or not you're trading out a cash cow at their max price, or if they're going to eke out a little bit more, is it worth holding onto them? Or, at that point in the year, trading out Dempsey to Garcia, who looked like one of the hotter cash cows. That's kind of made sense. Round 8, traded Powell to down to Garcia. I think it was Hugo Garcia from the Saints, who ended up being a flop. A lot of people jumped on him, and he just ended up not getting an opportunity from Ross the Boss. And then I traded Sharp to upgrade to Merit, which I think was a very good upgrade. Maxed out cash there from Sharp. And likewise Cadman, who I'd eked out as much cash as I could, to Jordan Sweet. Round 9, I traded Zach Williams to Luke Ryan there. At that point of the year, in insane form, Ryan, a lot of people were jumping on him and hedged my bets there. And who would have known that Freo would change their game plan and go direct as opposed to just chipping the ball around and giving Seagull Ryan his chips. Roberts, I traded down to Darcy Jones. Round 10, Graham, I upgraded to Fisher again, in and out of the side. And Naismith, was unfortunate for him doing his ACL. Should have probably started with a non-playing player in R3. I started with Naismith because I thought there was a chance there that Nank the Tank might be injured earlier on because he had a foot issue in the preseason and was just trying to guesstimate and take a bit of a calculated risk there. As it turned out, Naismith, the poor bloke in the VFL, did his ACL, so I traded him down to Revel via some DPP swings, and that gave me an extra 70, almost 73k, which in itself was okay. And because it allowed me then to upgrade Wilson from the Saints to Zach Butters and traded out Garcia from the Dogs to Richards from the Pies. Round 12, cashed in Sam Darcy and brought in Frazier and likewise Garcia for Moyle. And that was when I was over in the US at this point in the year as well. So another difficulty there for me to try and manage my SuperCoach side in entirely different bloody time zone there. But round 13, ended up trading Harley Reid to Dawson. Closey, I upgraded to Zorko, and then, Sweet to English, which I thought Zorko in English, that point of the year, round 13, as I said, my position had slid from 1.4k to 2.1k, and I thought, okay, this is the point where I can start making ground, but just wasn't to be. So that's virtually it. As you can see there, I think I went through the rest of the trades from round 13 onwards already. So that's virtually it. Let's compare it to last year. And I spoke about in terms of holding trades. And this was the latest I think I've ever held a trade. It was round 23. I used the trade, as I said, with Sheasel going for Sinclair. So previous to this year, season 2023, I started crapper. The first rank I had coming out of round 1 was 75k, and then I quickly ascended the ranks, and by round 17, I was inside the top 1k, ranked 900th, and then I went as high as 492nd in round 19, slid back, and that was the reason why, because after round 19, I'd used my last trade, and even though I had a 23rd man, as I mentioned earlier, that year in 2023, I had Hewitt. He had to be brought on virtually the second week that I had him because Walsh got injured, Doherty got injured, and I had to play rookies. And that's part of the reason why I slid back to 981st to finish the season. But yeah, not as much carnage as what it was this year, and that's part of the reason. But yeah, that explains the back end of how my team performed and why I slid. But I'll need to sort of delve a little bit deeper as to why I stagnated around 13. I think, just due to English. And then, Houston was a bad trade. I think the guys that I brought in as, upgrades, they weren't doing the job as what I thought. The other strategy I will speak to ever so quickly, we might wrap this up as well because I'm conscious that this is about to tick over an hour and a half in terms of length. But I am conscious as well that it is the 2024 recap, so want to get as much out of it as we can. But just going back to the comments ever so quickly, Double Dummy, you've said, Massimo starting in my side, finished in my side. Well done, mate. Saw him twice versus the Dogs in the Pracky games and went, and the Hawks will go through him a lot. And they did, mate. They absolutely did. Josh, good to have you joining us, mate. How's our Blue Baggers? How nerve-wracking was today? Josh, you've said you also held Ambrosio. the whole season. Joe Richards, yeah, it was a bit. It was a nice sort of way to end the year scoring wise for Joe Richards. That was a blessing. And you said when he got injured after everyone brought him in, yeah, it happened with quite a few players and guys that he suspended after you brought them in, like Rankine. Carl, you also said Massimo was fantastic late, and Matty Roberts also got his second wind on the way home, didn't he? Just he was incredible. He was someone that I was thinking about bringing into my team with my last trade, but as it turned out, probably wouldn't have served me as well as what Sinclair did in the end. And I was conscious of holding a trade because, as I said, it was last year I'd spent my last trade in round 19, and this year I kept at least one until round 23. And that was part of the reason being was because of so much carnage that we'd seen over, when Rankine got injured, when Gawn got injured, when Miller got injured, so on and so forth. Like, I don't know if it comes with experience, but, it's just the fact that you've had so much injuries, and it's like, well, you're probably better served to hold on to your last trade as long as you can. And it served me okay to a point, but I was just plugging holes. And even though I had the 23rd man, which I didn't speak about in the trades, but McKercher was it was Rosie. When I brought Rosie into my team, he was going to be my 23rd man off the bench to loop with Rawlinson. So that coincided with that week that I brought both of those guys in. When that happened, that's when injuries started to strike, and it meant that McKercher was another player that I brought in. Rosie was then brought on field permanently, and McKercher was sort of that swing between defence and midfield, if need be. And as it turned out, I needed to use him. So I was just lucky that I had that. People may say, was it worthwhile using the trade earlier on to bring in a 23rd man as opposed to holding the trade? I think it was because, again, I'm of the mindset that you make your own luck. And having a 23rd man with the quality and a DPP player at that in McKercher allowed me the flexibility for coverage, which he did. And it was something that I think kept me in good stead. Because if injuries didn't strike, I would have had that luxury of, what I initially wanted to plan for by bringing McKercher into my team was looping him with Rosie. And depending on which team played first of, their mobs, I would, bench one, put the emergency on him, and, use that as a bit of ace up the sleeve to allow me to screen their scores to then, you have a bit of a leg up over the rest of the competition, especially considering that Rosie was brought in by a whole heap of the competition. So being higher owned and being able to potentially loop him, and especially Steele, who in my team at that stage was performing pretty badly. Tommy Green had a really bad downturn of form as well after that injury. Those guys were part of the reason why I brought in that 23rd man to then loop those guys off field, and being higher ownership, it would have allowed me to get a leg up over the rest of the competition. So that wasn't able to be put into effect enough because of the fact that injuries hit, and I was just forced to use McKercher on field every single week, and likewise Rosie, likewise Green and Steele. That Steele trade I probably should have not done, but again, foresight is always 2020. I traded Steele virtually to Rankine, and Rankine went out. So yeah, not much you can do there. That's just terribly bad luck. Josh, he said, I held Matt Roberts to round 15 and traded when he was sub. Then after that, he got dropped and then came back and scored 164 and 106, and another ton, nearly makes 500 from 214k. Yeah, that's the thing. Like, you talk about guys that can get a second wind, whether it be cash cows or primos, like, it's all the same. The thing is, with Matt Roberts, he lost his role, obviously his position on the side as well. And it was like, well, there's no use holding him. So to get rid of him, I think everyone had to do. Made sense. But then, coming back, he got the role back again. And role is key in SuperCoach. Really, that's one of the big rules that I have up, in my SuperCoach mind of, when it comes to a player being reliable enough to selecting your team, it comes down to role. If they've got the role that's conducive of point scoring, then get him in your team 100%. If they're a primo, if they're a cash cow, mid-price, all that sort of stuff. And then after that, you look at, injury, durability, you look at consistency, whether or not they've got a high floor, high ceiling, all that sort of stuff. So, it's stuff that we know. And if you don't know, then, feel free to pick my brain a bit more. Happy to help in the comments section if you want to have any questions with regards to that. But yeah, it's one of the things that I've kind of learned across the journey. And you've got to adapt. And, spoke earlier about Lachie Neale. I avoided him because of the fact that I thought he was going to get tagged. Probably should have got tagged, but wasn't to be. Josh, you've said, do you think they should bring back SuperCoach in finals again, or is it too hard to do to field the whole team? Yeah, that was some good fun when they did that, and I wish they would, but virtually the way it worked was like at the conclusion of every week of finals, SuperCoach would go into lockout mode and then open up again, and they'd remove those teams that have actually been kicked out of finals. So you'd only have the teams to choose from that, obviously still in finals. So you'd pick a team entirely from scratch again every single week. So yeah, it was really, really good fun. And actually, I think it was probably more fun than some of the, I guess regular in-season SuperCoach. So yeah, I wish they'd bring it back, but don't think they will. Where to from here? So I've gone through my trades, gone through strategy. Key takeaways, I spoke about that. I think one of the other key takeaways, just to recap, I'll just talk about in terms of higher price guys. I'll think twice about starting them for next year. I think, if you have guys priced 700k, I more than likely won't be starting them because chances are they're going to drop in price to the tune of 50 plus K. That applies even to in season as well, targeting guys that are over 600k. That's kind of the price point where I'll be thinking twice, like, do I look for someone else of better value potentially and fade that player and in hoping that they'll drop in price, and they will at some point because it always happens. The other key takeaway would be using boosts early, which is totally fine, and I've done that over the past couple of years. Targeting cash cows, the best cash cows, I think it's something that I'll do again next year. I think one of the new takeaways from this season is potentially targeting guys that will avoid the tag. The tag is a funny thing because it always comes back into vogue in season. And I reckon it's after the midpoint of the year where they see one coach using a tag to great effect, and then all the coaches are like, you know what, we have to tag. It's a funny thing. It happens every single year where like the early part of the season coaches don't normally tag, but the midway point of the season, I don't know what it is. Coaches just change their strategy and try to be a little bit more, negating. So to that end, I think one of the new things that I've noticed across the season was those guys that avoid the tag. So using as an example, Dunkley is probably one. Didn't really attract a tag, I don't think at all once, despite the fact that, Neale was killing it. Neale wasn't get tagged either, but when Neale was actually getting tagged, it meant that Dunkley was allowed to go off the chain. Probably didn't score as well as what he was after their bye period, where he was scoring, 144, 143, 140. Only scored another 2 games from then on, 120 plus, but he's an example of someone that you could jump on that isn't going to attract a tag. Another guy is, funnily enough, Paddy Cripps. Sammy Walsh was getting a tag week in, week out. That's what killed his scoring outside of, I think he was playing injured. But Cripper was a very, very nice price point after the midway point of the season at 532k. And from then on, he scored a 144 times 2, 115, 114, 86, 125, 86, 142, and a 106. And ended the season with, from that point of the year, where he had dropped to 532, his average was 105.6, and then he ended the season 110.5. And a lot of that was helped off the back of not being tagged. So there are guys there that I think that I will look at a bit more closely next year of guys that will avoid the tag, because it just provides you with a little bit more security. It's not going to be applicable to every single player, because there are players that, don't get tagged and just aren't good SuperCoach scorers. That's just the way it is. But I think the guys that can push a good ceiling score, despite the fact that they're not being tagged from week to week, I think those are the guys that I'll be paying a little bit more attention to. Outside of that, I spoke about R3. I'll probably start with a non-playing player there again. I spoke about Naismith, didn't work. DPP players, I tried to prioritise those as well, and that served me well across the season by and large, which was good. Talking about, I guess, guys, just shifting things ever so slightly, and then we might wrap things up as well. In terms of who we could be starting for next year, and a bit of a segue here, Josh, you've spoken about it here. Next year, starting Whitfield and Cherry, 100%. Even Newcomb as well. A lot of people started him in their team, and he had a really stinker to start the year and then started to come home strong. But yeah, you spoke about it. Whitfield finally being played off halfback with a decent coach at the helm in Kingsley, compared to when Leon Cameron was playing him bloody up forward and ridiculous positions that weren't conducive to Supercoach scoring, but just wasn't playing to his strengths as a rebounder. So Whitfield's 100% definitely one I'll be looking at, even though he's been a burn man traditionally. Cherry, I think, is a lock and load already. I reckon he's going to be, one of the lock and load rucks over the years to come. The big part of his game is his tackling. I've spoken about this enough, and it just allows him that, that scoring floor that we know and love. And as a ruckman, it's just something that's completely unheard of. Contested play, contested work. He is priced at $730, so I do predict that his price going into next year will probably be around about $680 odd, if I was to guess. So it's going to be rivaling that of Bontempelli. And I spoke about it earlier in terms of starting guys at a very, very high price point. I think the only exception to the rule is guys that are in the ruck, because there's obviously only two positions there. Unless there's other guys that are of lower value that we can kind of jump on early season and try and bridge the gap between him and Cherry, whoever that play may be, and then jump across to Cherry when Cherry drops in price. We'll have to wait and see, but I think at this stage, Cherry is a lock and load for me. Outside of that, TDK is probably another player as well. Showed enough that, when he's number one ruck, good old Tom DeConning, that he can score quite well. We spoke about him in the preseason as well, Liam and I said that he wasn't yet at the stage of being able to pump out those big scores because he's been stuck behind, or at least sharing a ruck load with good old Pitnet. And that rung true all the way until round 11, when he played the number one ruck and just went bang, 131, 140, 146, 176, 128. Similar to Cherry in a sense when it comes to tackling numbers, really, really good. But it's his around the ground work that really, really is good as well. Averaging low 20 odd disposals every single game, and score involvements. He's not really overly dominant in the ruck, I will say. But the string in his bow is, around the groundwork, tackling, and being able to play as almost an extra midfielder with his contested work. So Cherry as well does the exact same thing. So Cherry 100%. And I think TDK will be my other ruckman. And it's probably a little bit of a blessing in disguise, not so much for us Carlton supporters, but the fact that he got injured probably will mean that he starts around about that 600k mark, maybe even lower, and will be a better value player compared to if he didn't get injured and ended the season at the average that he was having, which was an average of 101.5. So yeah, he's definitely one. Double dummy, you've said I have him in keeper, so well done to you, mate. You're in a very nice position there. Rucks are going to be tough, you've said. Cherry, Gawn, Roma, all good options next year. I think I might fade Gawn next year. Whilst he's still been pretty good, I am worried with the fact that he's another year older. He had a couple more niggles than you would, prefer him not to have. And I think Rowe Marshall is in the similar sort of mold to Cherry and TDK, where his effectiveness around the ground is really impactful, and it translates to Supercoach scoring. So depending on the price points of Gawn and Rowan Marshall. I think Marshall, what did he end up on? Was he similar price point? Yeah, he's actually $300 cheaper than Gawn, believe it or not. So very, very similar price points. Finished the season with a 120. Really, really good run of form. And again, spoke about it numerous times already, but those guys that have been in rough patches of scoring, midway point of the year, he had dropped down with scores of 73, 85, 95, 79, 117, 111, and then from round 18 onwards, he just turned things around. Went 107, 123, 135, 126, 126, 146, and a 120 to be. Was he ranked the second? No, he's ranked the third best averaging ruck in the competition. So, yeah, there's definitely that. Let's do a bit of a segue now to having a look at the top scorers in context with the players that I chose in my team here, and we might round things out there unless you guys have any more questions with regards to my team or looking ahead to 2025, of which Liam and I will do in our Mad Monday wrap-up episode as well. But as you can see here, those guys that I have in my team among the top scoring players, you would think that my team should have finished higher than what it did, because I had Bont, who finished the number one scorer. I had Butters. Cherry I didn't have, who finished third overall. Dacos in fourth, Ryan fifth, Sarong sixth, Merritt seventh. Neil ended up being the 8th highest overall total point scorer. Flanders 9th I had, and Maxi Gawn I had as well. Outside of that, scrolling down, I had Zorko, who was 16th. Isaac Heaney, who was 23rd, but of course that drops down due to the fact that he missed the game in round 24. Tom Green, 25th. Sinclair, 27th. Nick Martin, 28th. English, 31st. Houston, 32nd, and so on and so forth. Better reflection is to look at things in terms of average, because, total points obviously doesn't account for those games that are missed, whereas an average does. So, yeah, looking at an average, we have Bont, first overall, Gawn, second highest averaging player, Butters, third, who I had. Didn't have Cherry, who was fourth. Didn't have Neil, who was fifth. I had Flanders, who was sixth. I did have Sheasel, who was seventh, but of course he got injured, so he traded out. Dacos, 8th. Heaney, 9th. Luke Ryan, 10th. Treloar I didn't have in 11th. I had Sarong in 12th. Merritt in 13th. Zorko, 18th. Sinclair, 21st. Walsh, 25th. English, 26th. Houston, 30th. Green, 33rd. Nick Martin, 36th. And NWM, 51st. And a few other players as well that have been up and down. Let's have a quick look and filter it by defence, midfielder, ruck, and forwards to see in terms of those top scorers that I had in each line. Probably a bit of reflection here, but Sheasel ended up finishing as the highest averaging player in defence. I did have him, of course, as I said, traded him out. Dacos, I have. Finished in second. Ryan, I had. Finished in third. Didn't have Whitfield, didn't have McGovern in fifth. But I had Sinclair, who finished in sixth. Houston, who finished in 7th, and Martin in 8th, and then Wangan and Miller in 14th. So, as I said, with Wangan and Miller, he didn't end up being the type of scorer that I was hoping him to be. Wish I got on Whitfield or someone like him instead. But by and large, I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 out of the top 10 scoring or averaging defenders. So, not too bad there. Let's have a look at the midfield. Of course, this is by average, and I had Bont in first place there. Butters I owned in second. Didn't have Neil in third. I had Flanders in fourth, but of course being a forward. Dacos in fifth, of course being a defender. Heaney in sixth, being more of a forward. Treloar I didn't own, who finished in seventh. I had Sarong in eighth. I had Merritt in ninth. Missed Dunkley and Cripps in 10th and 11th. And I had Zorko in 12th. Sinclair in 13th, who's more a defender. Walsh in 17th. Tom Green in 21st, and Nick Martin, who's more a defender, in 23rd. So missed out on Neil by and large, and Treloar. And as I said earlier, Dunkley and Cripps would have been guys that I probably should have looked at, considering that they were avoiding the tag by and large. Looking at the rucks, I had Gawn, who ended up being the top averaging ruck. Cherry was in second, didn't have. Marshall in third. Nank in fourth, and English was in fifth. And Jackson, who's more of a forward, in 14th. So that time when I went for English, I should have gone for someone like a Cherry. Yeah, just stupid play, really. But again, at that point of the year, Cherry was only starting to make his way up and really didn't have much of a ceiling that he flashed in the last sort of month of the season. So couldn't do too much about that at the time. Looking at the forwards to round things out, so Flanders, I did pretty well here in terms of averages. Flanders was first, Heaney second, Zorko third. Didn't have Dylan Moore in fourth, Rankine in fifth, Jackson sixth, and Caldwell seventh. And then Charlie Curnow was the big drop-off, who finished in 17th. So not too bad apart from good old Charles. But that's virtually it. That is my team. That's how things evened out. That's sort of the players that I was aiming for. As you can see, I did pretty well by and large, trying to aim for those top scorers. And that was the other strategy that I went into this year with, was paying, pretty much whatever it takes to try and get in the top scorers, as it rolls from week to week throughout the season in terms of, aiming. I always say, I use the phrase aiming for the top shelf. The higher price players, the more premium quality players, as if you're reaching for like the big old, nice bottle of scotch that's been, aged for 40 years and it's just been sitting there. Those are the Flanders, that's the Heaney, those are the, the big dogs, the Bont, the Butters, and that's virtually what I was doing throughout the year. And I think I will, and this is kind of the first year where I've done that, and part of the reason why I invested so heavily in those big cash cows like Sharp, Dempsey, who else was there? Wilson, so on and so forth. So all these guys that I wanted to invest in, because it allowed me then to have those big cash generators, to allow me to have the cash to then reach for the top shelf. So it served me well up to a point, but I think at that point where I started to sort of lose rank, the times when I needed to, jump on potentially some pod players that were showing some nice form, like Neil, and so on and so forth, like those pod primos. I know there's pod players, but when it comes to pods, in my eyes, you go for pod primos because it gives you a little bit of a safety net, knowing that they have a nice historical scoring, not going for pods like, trying to think of someone off the top of my head. If I just scroll down the list here, in the rucks, in the forwards, like going for a Brian Myers, who was only in 2.9% of teams. Yes, he had some nice scores, but if you look at his breakdown in scores, they were few and far between. Only had 1 ton from round 11 onwards. So just not good enough. Had scores in the 30s, 80s, 40s. It just, those sort of players aren't the pods you want to go for because they can kill you and hurt you more often than not. So yeah, again, just have to sort of take those risks. And I think those are calculated risks that I'll be trying to use heading into 2025. Where are we? So just looking back at the comments here. Josh, you've said, personally, I wouldn't be going for TDK if Pitnet is playing. No. And that's part of the reason why I wasn't really for him when we were talking about, rucks at the start of the year, because being a Carlton man, I know that when TDK is sharing the ruck with Pitt, he doesn't score well. So yeah, it depends on how Carlton's going to use both him and Pitt in 2025. So we'll see how things go there. The rucks next year will be out of Darcy Cameron. I don't know about Darcy Cameron, but yeah, you could potentially. Cherry and Rowan Marshall. TDK, Toby, Nank, Gawn will be high risk for reward. Oscar McInerney is a good shout. Riley O'Brien. Are you going for Treloar? Treloar's been more of a better fantasy scorer compared to SuperCoach. So traditionally, I've not been a fan of him in SuperCoach, but he's taken his game to another level. So yeah, he's someone that I think you should factor in and maybe consider. But yeah, at this stage, I don't think so at his price point. Craze Fit, SuperCoach is over. It will sink in soon. It will, mate. It will. It hasn't quite sunk in yet. It's ticked over past 1 a.m. now. I've been recording this. Almost gone for 2 hours. So it's only starting to sink in now. But for me, off the back of this, obviously Liam and I will get together this week over the coming, next couple of days, and we'll record our Mad Monday episode to recap round 24 and the season as a whole. And then I think for us, it'll sink in. But from here, we'll turn our attention to, we play AFLW Fantasy, so we don't do a show on that because we're just absolutely cooked at this time of year. From, I think we've churned out 60, this might be the 64th bit of content that we've put out in terms of grouping together our weekly episodes as well as the team talk episodes. So we're both absolutely cooked. I'm absolutely cooked because I do all the recording and editing and uploading, everything else. So even more so for me. But I'm just looking forward to not having to worry about doing that. Give me a little bit of a breather as well as Liam as well when it comes to jumping on and recording our weekly episodes. But yeah, we'll be doing AFLW fantasy. And I do double in a bit of NFL fantasy, which if you are keen to join and follow us along, check out the Discord and we'll chat about it in there. But it doesn't stop. And then there's BBL SuperCoach, which is a game that I've excelled in, and I've finished top 1K every single year. So yeah, I'll be punching out some content for that when that does come around in November or thereabouts. So yeah. Bit more of a smaller scale type operation there, but if you're keen, follow along and you'll find it on the YouTube channel here, as well as podcast as well. Josh, you've said Andy Brayshaw, just in terms of guys that have turned around form. McGovern, Tom Stewart, Ed Richards. Hogan would have been a better pick than Curnow. Yeah, he would have, but again, key position forwards, I don't think are really anything to write home about. Darcy Cameron has had a big season. Quickly compare players using that thing, Jesse Hogan versus Charlie Curnow, to see which pick would have been better. We'll quickly do that, and then we might wrap things up, mate. But of course, if anyone have any questions, comments, all that sort of stuff, feel free to leave them down below. You can hit me up at DamoJ88 on Twitter, and happy to chat further. So we're just comparing here, for those people tuning in via the podcasts, just between comparing Hogan and Curnow. So Hogan ended up scoring, where are we? Season 2024. I don't think it shows the breakdown, does it? In points. Which is stupid. It doesn't work in terms of comparing. It only goes by projections and high scores, like historically of players that have played against. Because it's via, what do you call it? The SuperCoach Plus. It only shows the breakdown of scores across the cumulative average and stuff. So it doesn't really show you too much there, unfortunately. But apart from obviously the price point, the season ranks, so Hogan ended up being the 52nd best scorer, and in 7% of teams compared to Charlie Curnow, 15.1% of teams. Average per round was 92.4 for Hogan and 82.4 for Charlie Curnow, and yeah, that's pretty much it. But yeah, it doesn't show you the breakdown, unfortunately, round by round. A 3-round average for rucks you've requested, so let's just have a quick look at that for 3-round average. And that's probably something that I needed to utilize a bit more as well in terms of trading later in the season, especially because a 3 and 5 round average gives you a better snapshot in terms of if a player's turned around their form, as I spoke of with Neil and the like. Even Cherry coming good. As you can see there, like Cherry, 3-round average to end the season, 149.7, ridiculous, and a 5-round average of 148.8, which is unheard of. Even if you extend it to players in any position, Cherry was number 1 with 149.7, Butters was second with 134, Darcy Cameron, 133.7, who was a big surprise in terms of the way he was scoring. He had a couple of big scores there, 165, 144 against the Swans and the Lions. Good end to the season for him. That's for sure. And Jai Newcomb, and we spoke about him earlier, his turnaround in form has been really, really good. I mean, he does struggle for ceiling scores. That's the only knock in his game. Started to develop a bit more of a floor, but, last 2 games of the year, 162 and a 140, albeit against minnow sides in Richmond and North. Could be someone to look at closely for 2025. Outside of that, I think Sheasel is a guy that I think I'll be starting for 2025. Dacos is another guy. I think it's almost the season of the new age Supercoacher. So Tom Green, I think I'll even start again. Would love to see how the forwards structure up because Zorko will be a defender only, you would think, for 2025. So we lose another, good forward. Heaney, is he mid only? It's going to make the forward line even more dire, really. And it might mean we have to rely on genuine forwards like Keys, which won't be ideal. But yeah, just looking quickly at the forwards. This is, of course, discussing 2025 ever so quickly. You would think that Flanders could potentially lose his forward status. Zorko should lose his forward status. He should be more of a mid defender, or at least a defender only. Heaney, you would think, would probably be a mid only. Dylan Moore, he's probably one who will keep his forward status, be a lock and load. Jackson may keep his forward ruck status, so he might be a lock and load. Jai Caldwell might be mid only. Outside of that, Tom Powell maybe as a forward mid. Fisher, probably more of a defender as opposed to a forward defender. Matthew Kennedy might be one. Yeah, it's going to be even more slim pickings, believe it or not, for 2025, you think, in the forward line. So Liam and I will chat about that in a bit of greater detail when we reconvene for our last episode, of course, which will be dropping over the next couple of days. So, of course, we will be recapping just quickly round 24. And we will be recapping, of course, what's transpired across the course of the season as well, reviewing things, best scorers, and then, of course, finishing off with a bit of a look ahead of, plays that we've got our eye on ever so, I guess, quickly before we know the details about prices and positions and everything else. So look forward to that. If you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, it's not too late, of course, because you will get notification. If you do so, and you can click the notification bell to reconfirm that as well when the episode does drop. But we'll reconvene for that, and that will wrap up and put an official bow on the SuperCoach AFL season officially for SuperCoach Edge here. It's been an absolute pleasure to have all of you, as I said earlier, tuning in from week to week. And until, I guess, the end of the season, I'll be jumping across to my own alternative channel here, of course, which is SuperCoach Edge. So if you wanted to check out the content that I provide on there, feel free to do so. And then the SuperCoach Edge channel will go into a bit of a hibernation until BBL comes around in around about November. So we've got a couple of seasons off, you could say, or a month of October, and then November. I think it might be late November, or early December, where BBL starts up again. And I will be doing my weekly team talk videos and podcasts as well, so you can look forward to that. But outside of that, ladies and gents, I think that is us in terms of our team talk last edition here for season 2024. It's been an absolute pleasure, as I said, to have everyone tune in from week to week. These lives have been a bit more of a feature in the later part of the year, just because I haven't really had much time to pre-record them, cut them together and put them up. So really do appreciate your patience in that, but also appreciate you jumping on to these live streams on YouTube and joining in the discussion and making it a bit more interactive. And I hope you have enjoyed it in turn as well. Double Dummy, you've said, cheers, mate. We'll try to check out the Discord more often. No worries at all, mate. Always a pleasure to have you and the regulars jumping on for the lives as well. But I will grab the link here for where is it? For the Discord as well, for those people that are yet to join our Discord. Where are we? I'll whack it here in the chat here, just ever so quickly. Click on that link and it will direct you to our Discord. We do have various channels there, which we will try and keep the Discord as active as we can across the course of the off season. Of course, when BBL fires up, that will fire up in turn as well. But thank you so much, as always, for tuning in. As I said, that's the end of my Team Talk videos for the season. Just recapping things where I ended up finishing with a rank 5,859th. Copped, I think it was like 3 or 4 donuts to end the season of the previous 3 or so weeks. Hasn't been the best end to the season, probably one of my worst ends to the season in a fair while. If I just have a quick recap, obviously 2023 finished inside the top 1K, which was good. 2022 finished 3,757th, so a little bit better. And 2021, similar sort of thing. And 2020, I think, was the year that I scored. I know that was a write-off. That was a COVID year that year. 2019 was a good year where I ended up finishing 147th overall, and I had a season high of 30th in round 15. So hopefully we can come back, bounce back stronger than ever, have a bit more luck on our side, which is what we want. And hopefully we can, if we're not at the top, at least we can try and crack the 1K or the top 100 and go from there. But as always, if you want to hit us up, you can do so at DamoJ88 on Twitter. And then, of course, SuperCoach_Edge as well. Really do appreciate it. Carl, you are someone that we really appreciate as well. You've said top work, Damo. Good luck to your boys in September, and likewise to you and everyone else who has a team still in September. And hopefully you had some luck for round 24 if you're in cash leagues or even overall. All the very best. But that's it, ladies and gents. Thank you again for tuning in. Really do appreciate you, and we'll see you for the Mad Monday episode. Make sure to be there. We will be releasing that on a Tuesday or Wednesday, and a bit of a nice recap, bit of fun. Might even do that live as well for people to jump on, and we'll make it a bit more interactive as we have with this. So until next time, ladies and gents, we will catch you in the next one. See you there at the Mad Monday episode. We'll see you then. Cheers.